Miami. So Miami is now down an OC and a DC heading into year 2 for Mario Cristobal in that group. Kind of weird. Kind of something to monitor as a college football fan, what's going to go on with Miami this offseason. But Tommy Rees, who 2 years ago had that video that someone posted of him, my heart is here to the players because he was a Notre Dame guy. And my heart was in Notre Dame. And I know he loves it. But the pull of Nick Saban was too much for Tommy Rees to say no. And Tommy Rees, the Notre Dame alum, OC for the last couple of years, stayed on. I know Brian Kelly tried to hire him when he first got the LSU job and bring him over. He elected to stay at his alma mater with Marcus Freeman. He's now out. And we'll get into how this affects Sam Hartman, who just transferred to Notre Dame and to basically play because Marcus Freeman is a defensive-minded guy. He's not calling plays. He came for Tommy Rees, and that opportunity to play for him is now out the door. So we'll see what happens there. But it's interesting. I didn't have either of these two being the two guys that Bama ultimately ended up with. I think this is pretty surprising. I think some of the takes it's interesting to see around the league. Bama fans don't seem all that enthralled by both hires, but where are you at with Bama choosing Kevin Steele to take over the defense here from Pete Golding and Tommy Rees to take over the offense?
Well, I hope this doesn't undercut my entire opinion, but Nick Saban knows a little bit more about football than I do. I just want to put that out there to start with. So I trust that he knows what he's doing. I'll just say that from the jump. Tommy Rees just was very surprising when I first heard it. It's not that it's a bad hire, but it's you look at Notre Dame's offense the last couple of years, and it's that's not what I was expecting Alabama to get. For Alabama to be oh, what they're doing up there, yeah, bring that down to Tuscaloosa. But obviously, Alabama's got way better players than Notre Dame. I don't necessarily know what the quarterback situation is, but I trust it's going to be better than what Notre Dame was. We know the way Alabama's recruited. The offensive line, the skill players, all of that. It's going to be better than what Notre Dame is doing. So that's going to make any offensive coordinator's job easier right off the bat. But, we talked about some of those names, the Scott Frosts of the world, just some of these kind of bigger names, the rehabilitation clinic, that coaching clinic that Tuscaloosa has been. I kind of expected one of those bigger names, a guy who's been a head coach, coming the next time through to be a coordinator. That's why Tommy Rees just kind of surprised me. It's not that it's a bad hire. And like you said, Brian Kelly tried to get this guy last year. I think Brian Kelly and Nick Saban are two of the 4 or 5 best coaches in college football. And if they want him as offensive coordinator, I imagine he knows what he's doing. Kevin Steele, on the other hand, it's he feels like such a retread, And so that's why I feel like Alabama fans, this is just, what am I trying to say? Uncharted territory for Alabama fans. They're just not used to going and getting the regular hire. It's we hit a home run with every hire. We get Jeremy Pruitt as our DC when Kirby Smart leaves us. It's
we get Lane Kiffin.
Exactly. We get Lane Kiffin. We get Steve Sarkisian, these Bill O'Brien, guys who've been NFL head coaches. And to get a guy like Kevin Steele, who was really good at Auburn, he for a 5-6 year period there. I think he's been at Auburn multiple times.
He was a good interim head coach at Tennessee for a couple weeks there in January after the Jeremy Pruitt firing.
I think we'll all remember the Kevin Steele Tennessee tenure. But yeah, so he has been a good DC, but it just doesn't feel like the home run grand slam hire that every Nick Saban hire seems to be. So I think that's why Alabama fans are probably sitting here what is this? Are we just a regular good program now? Are we not just head and shoulders the best? What's going on?
I think that's the best way of looking at it is if any other school hired Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele as your DC and OC combination, you're that worked out pretty well. For most schools would take that. Most schools would be it's pretty solid. It's a good foundation. I trust both those guys. I don't know if they're the elite of the elite, but they're probably top 15 in both sides. I would say you could do way worse than either of those two running the offense or defense.
And coaching Alabama's players, I think is going to make both of those coaches look a lot better than maybe they've ever been.
I do think it's funny though, where like Bama fans were. It seemed like they were just so unanimous in wanting to move on from both Golding and especially Bill O'Brien. They were upset with Bill O'Brien this year, all year. I think that, I don't know how you look at it any other way. Where I'm like, I think it's a downgrade, right? Like I think Tommy Rees is not better than Bill O'Brien. Like Bill O'Brien has never had a bad offense. You go through Houston, the issues with Houston and Bill O'Brien was not the offense. It was him getting personnel control and making a lot of bad trades. Like that was the issue. It was never like what his offenses
and
were.
Apparently rubbing people the wrong way kind of in Houston as a personality types thing.
But it was X and O's, and like he knows offense. Like the offenses were good. This Bama team was top 6 in offense this year. This was not an issue. Tommy Rees has never sniffed a top 6 offense. And like you said, he's never played with Alabama players, but Notre Dame's recruited well. It's not like they haven't had a bunch of talent. I think what it signifies to me bringing Kevin Steele and Tommy Rees is Nick Saban's like pivoting. Nick Saban's going, we've done a lot of the fun stuff, a lot of the score a bunch of points, flashy Alabama football. I've adapted with Tua and Bryce Young and company. We're going back to the A.J. McCarron era. Ty Simpson is going to be A.J. McCarron 2.0. We are going to run the ball down your throats because that's what Notre Dame has done over the years. They've had good running backs. They play ball control. They play very physical brand of football. At Notre Dame, Brian Kelly did that. Marcus Freeman just did that this past year. They play really strong defense. We're going to build from our offensive line. Like Notre Dame has pumped out a bunch of NFL players in the offensive line. They've developed really well there. Tight ends, they develop really well. I think they're pivoting. I think this signals to me is Saban like, nope, too flashy. I'm going back to what won me a lot of football games early on, and we are going to play ball control offense. Kevin Steele is just going to be a guy. We're going to have a very physical, tenacious defense. We're not going to go a bunch of points. We're not going to play with a bunch of tempo. We are going to just put our best players out there, keep the ball control, and out physical you, and make your life a living hell. That's what this signifies to me. Is they're going back to the old school to me, Matt Green.
I mean, that would be pretty radical if he was really going old school. Like, I mean, if you talk like if what you're saying is true, then that means Nick Saban is looking at Georgia and Kirby Smart and saying like, that's what we need to be doing.
I think that's what he is. That's what I'm saying.
Like Kirby Smart basically built Georgia the way Alabama used to be built. Yes. And Alabama's like, we should go back to the way Georgia's doing it.
We don't have to play flashy. We have better players than everybody else. We're going to play that.
I mean, obviously Georgia's won 2 national championships 2 years in a row, but there's nothing about Alabama's style that is preventing them from winning national championships. I mean, they just did it in 2020 with, the number 1 offense in college football. Like, I don't know if they were number 1 overall points per game. I want to say they were.
Wait, who was?
Alabama in 2020.
Yes, they were.
I mean,
in 2020 with Mac Jones, they were, yeah.
That's just 2 years ago. And with Tua, like, setting records in the SEC in 2018, obviously got blasted by Clemson in the national championship, but, like, they made the national championship game. So I feel like there's no, especially you look at Georgia, like, there's no reason to go back to A.J. McCarron days. Like, you just have to fix the defense. Like, Georgia, if anything, Georgia is getting more in the tempo and the more high tempo offense and everything, but just still playing elite defense and never gave up running the ball, always being a complementary type style. So it's not like Alabama has to go back to the A.J. McCarron days, the Greg McElroy days. Like, you have to start playing elite defense again. I think that's the biggest difference. It's like because it's never going to be a bad thing to be dropping 45 points on somebody. Like, I mean, that's still. But Alabama, the last few years, they've been good defensively. They're just not used to being good. They're used to being elite defensively. So they Golding's had some 10th ranked defenses, 15th ranked defenses that are like that's really good. Like, me and my brother were going through it. I think about like the Mark Richt days. Like, think about 2011 and 2012. You're like, oh yeah, those were years we had like a great defense, and like Georgia had like the 20th ranked defenses those years. It's like, we had no idea what elite even was back then. It's like Alabama defense, it's truly elite. And so when they're only really good, everyone's calling for the guy's job. So I think what this honestly says to me, these hires kind of going back, is maybe Golding really did just leave on his own and Alabama didn't have a plan of how to replace him, because not that Kevin Steele's not a good
Same
hire.
is true with Bill O'Brien, by the way, I would say.
Yeah, and maybe these guys just felt the pressure and kind of felt pushed out. I mean, but Bill O'Brien didn't take another job, did he?
No, yeah, he took the Patriots job. He's the Patriots offensive coordinator.
Oh, he's Patriots OC.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, they could have just been blindsided. Like, it was kind of painted as, oh, Alabama wants to move on. They're going to go find a new job, and they'll replace them. But
because they have that cachet. Like, they had that cachet to be like, oh, they were ready to move on, and they were going to go get Joe Brady and whoever, and we're going to bring Jeremy Pruitt back in, and we're going to co-DC Jeremy Pruitt and, like, I don't know, insert elite defense. Like, Dave Aranda's going to resign from Baylor, and he's going to be the co-DC with whatever. But it's like, then you see the report that he flew to Saban, and Bama flew to Washington, right, to interview their OC Grubb, who's been with Kalen DeBoer forever, and you're like, oh. The big names aren't coming. The Joe Brady's and the Cliff Kingsburys are not coming.
And there was Grantham talk, and then he took the job with the Saints. It's like, who knows if he was really offered the job, you know? You never really know. And I'm not making a prediction here.
Yeah.
And I want that to be clear. But if you remember 2015, Brian Schottenheimer with Georgia, it basically signified the end of Mark Richt's tenure. And, you know, maybe that's not fair to Brian Schottenheimer. They just got 1 year, and Georgia didn't have great talent at quarterback.
No, we have a whole decade plus of Brian Schottenheimer offenses.
For sure. Everyone's got their opinion of Brian Schottenheimer. But Nick Saban, like, this isn't his offense, right? So I feel like it's for him to be changing it up. Like, with Kiffin and Sarkisian, it felt like a lot of kind of overlap, like it's same stylistic type thing. Bill O'Brien, just like kind of a lot of the same blood, at least. Tommy Rees seems completely different. So this feels like super important to get this hire right, because like you look at, not that any pressure is on Nick Saban on the hot seat or anything, but just in terms of what Alabama wants to continue to be moving forward, like these offensive skill players were not what Alabama always has, every year. Like, these receivers were very subpar for Alabama standards. Jahmyr Gibbs was a baller until whatever happened kind of down the stretch. He kind of became less involved in the game plan. He's gone, right? He's to the NFL. So it's like Bryce Young is gone. This offense is going to look very different, and it doesn't, like, as amazing as the recruiting stars have been, because, like, the next 3 years, I should say, these past three classes, 23, 22, and 21, like, they're three of, like, the top 7 classes in, like, 24/7 history. So, like, I think there's 19 5-stars. Obviously, some of those are on defense. But, like, these classes are loaded, but we haven't necessarily seen the same level of, like, elite talent in Alabama's, like, skill players. Like, obviously, excluding Bryce Young, he was a baller, but... You know, so I think there's a low-key a lot of pressure on Tommy Rees coming in to kind of really, you know, put his identity on this offense.
It's never great when, like, Tim Brown, the legend, said, quote, after the hire to Bama, "This is a great day for Irish football, and maybe even a better day for Tommy Rees. I've been around a lot of offenses, but the Irish offense last year, with maybe the exception of the North Carolina game, was extremely predictable. Seeing the offense struggle told me at least 2 things. One, Tommy was very dependent on Kelly, and more important, he didn't have the ability to dissect a defense. What we saw is what I call hero ball. You have a player, Meyer, who he's talking about here, who is better than the person covering, and you throw him the ball a zillion times."
Wow.
Like, it's never good.
That's from Tim Brown?
Yeah, Tim Brown tweeted all that. And
Tim Brown doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would just run his mouth either. Yeah. He seems like a real thoughtful guy.
And I think he wants the best for Notre Dame football. And he's like, this is probably the best.
Like this. Wow.
Like I don't think it's great when Notre Dame fans are like, oh, we can revamp this offense now. Who can we get? Who can we get to take over this offense with Sam Hartman and company? Like, I think this is, if it wasn't Bama, man, I think everybody would be like, I don't know. I think this is a step back. I think the hires on both sides, there is a real possibility this is a step back for both. This is a huge gamble for Nick Saban to bet on Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele in 2023, because Notre Dame's offense, Matt, do you remember who they lost to at home this past year?
They lost to Marshall, right?
Marshall and Stanford.
Oh, the Stanford. That was probably worse than Marshall.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this, I don't know, man. Like, I'm surprised that Nick Saban and Bama couldn't do better than both of these two. And I think both are fine. You could even say, you could tell me on Kevin Steele's an A minus DC. I think you could tell me on that A minus. I wouldn't say he's an A plus, but like A or A minus. Reese is like a solid, like best case scenario with Bama players B, but I would say he's more towards the C plus range. And I don't know, man. This is gonna be fascinating. I'm way more interested. You know what's never great when the rivals of your fan base or of other fan bases are like, I'm not as scared about playing Bama anymore. Like I'm not as afraid of Josh Heupel having to match Tommy Rees. I'm not as concerned about that. I wouldn't
go crazy though. I think Kevin Steele has been a very good DC.
Yeah, but the offense, like, are they going to score enough? Are they going to be able to score enough?
But I think there's only a few teams that can play that style of
ground and pound, physical, no turnovers, run it down your throats, that sort of thing.
Exactly. You just have to recruit a certain level of athlete to be able to even consider playing that style. And Alabama does get those type players. So I'm not going to just rule it out.
But it's clear that they didn't have a direction either, right? Because that's the under talked about thing for me, and this last thing we'll touch on it before we move on. But like, he went over to Grubb at UW. They run the air raid. Like, they got points. For him to pivot from him to Tommy Rees tells me there was no, like, ideological plan here, right? Like, he didn't have, like, one kind of offensive philosophy that he was zoned in on and wanting to... I don't know, man. I think that's something to consider, too, is that Washington's offense is very, very different than what Notre Dame's running.
However, there is something to be said for... the quarterback play that Notre Dame's had the last couple years has just been pretty awful. Like, obviously a coach can make quarterbacks look better, but sometimes if the talent's not there, the talent's not there. So it's like, maybe Tommy Rees has a certain philosophy that he just wasn't even able to implement because of the lack of personnel at Notre Dame. So you never know.
Texas and Oklahoma, we do know, it looks like, are not going to make the jump to the SEC until 2025, Matt Green. Does this excite you? What does this mean for Texas, Oklahoma? Do you think they even get a Big 12 win championship in the next 2 years? Like, I think this is going to be interesting to monitor, and I'm glad. Like, we're going to get 2 years of Texas and OU in the Super Big 12. I think this is going to be fun. I'm glad we're at least getting 2. I'm a year-by-year guy. This is going to be fun. I'm glad this happened. There
because the 1 year is just going to be like, I don't know. You remember that 1 year of the Big 12 was just like 16 teams and it was just or 14, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that we get 2 years, it's like that's like an era. It's like there was the one era where we just had the Super Big 12 there for a couple of years. But honestly, I think they're going to watch this play for 2 years and be like,